You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
Hey everybody, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smog is coming out in theaters this week, and you know what that means?
We're going to be sitting in the theaters for 5 hours.
I didn't expect that one, it's pretty funny. Yes, and it also means another episode of Don't F with the Original.
With Nicholas, I'm the video game correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I'm Dimitri, editor-in-chief of idiomatic.com and movie critic. And as is the habit, not the Hobbit, but Tish.
Oh, that's bad.
When a new movie comes out, we discuss the original. Now, you know, we're at part 2 for The Hobbit. I didn't really want to review The Hobbit part 1, mostly because I didn't watch it and don't want to.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then we thought, okay, well, let's do the Lord of the Rings thing. And then we realized, well, there's an older version of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
We're talking about the Ralph Bakshis Lord of the Rings movie from
1978.
So that's old.
Indeed.
It's an animated movie. It's pretty cool. And I'll let you talk about what the plot is.
The plot is the Lord of the Rings. If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, you need to crawl from whatever rock you've been living in the last 10 years and just rent it. You know, the Peter Jackson version's pretty good. You know, if you watch it once, do not get the extended edition because, you know, you don't want to die sitting on your couch. But still, a good movie to watch. What the cartoon does, it takes the first book and half of the second book. So it's basically the Community of the Ring and half of the Two Towers. And makes a 2.5-hour cartoon about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Pretty faithful to the J.R.R. Tolkien book. And in a way, I find that the atmosphere that they created in that animated movie is a lot more faithful to the spirit of the books.
Yeah, it's so somber. It's like, for a cartoon especially, you would think it's like all those bright colors and everything. No, there's like no yellow, no blue, it's all like grayish and, you know, green and everything. It's so stylish in that way.
So when the orcs come out, like everything around them is grayish, brownish. You don't really see anything, and then that's actually in the book.
Yeah,
they sort of suck out the light of everywhere, wherever they go, which is pretty well done. And at the same time, it's not nearly as somber as the Peter Jackson movies. There's still a little bit of color, so you get a stronger idea of what it is they're fighting for.
Yeah, when they need the color, like when they have the elves, or when they're in Rivendell, or in the Lothlorien with Galadriel, you have those white colors, but when they're not, it's like, oh man, it's so bleak around them. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and I like that dichotomy because it gives you an idea of what it is they're fighting for, what it is they're protecting, why that fight matters, which I didn't get with the Peter Jackson movie because I found everything was so muddy and grayish that it was like, oh no, they're destroying the world. It looks exactly the same as before, you know what I mean? And whereas this is much more balanced, so I like that a lot.
Yeah. I really like about this movie, which is something you rarely find me see about a 2.5-hour movie, but it really gets to the point so much faster than the Peter Jackson version. They really cut the useless stuff. I mean, they get to Rivendell in like 10 minutes or so. It's crazy. It's like no hobbits walking, no nothing. It's just, all right, we're in Rivendell now. Where to next? And the director really does a good job of cutting what is not important to the narrative. The purists are going to be so offended by it, but I think if you're trying to make a movie and make it watchable in a reasonable amount of time, you have to do that, and they do a great job of it.
Yeah, and they cover more ground than the Fellowship of the Ring, the Peter Jackson version, because in that 2.5 hours, which is the same runtime as the Fellowship of the Ring, they get 1/2 book further.
Exactly.
Having said that, I still thought it was excruciatingly slow. Like, I was like, I'm bored. And again, like, for those of you who don't know, all that magic and dragon stuff just does not work for me at all. And it's not like it's not because I think it's stupid or I think magic is stupid. No, I'm fine with fantasy and all that. It's just, for some reason, there's no anchor for me to grasp onto, I guess. Maybe it's a problem, but I never get into them.
Okay.
And so I was watching this movie going like, I'm bored.
Even when I was bored, though, I was really appreciating the cool, fluid animation, which was like, it was still fun to look at, even though the story at certain times was not moving forward as fast as I really wanted it. He could have made it a 2-hour movie if he really wanted to. just cutting a little more here and there. Maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes, but he could still cut a little more here and there.
Yeah, I agree with you that part of the issue is probably with the source material in the sense that I think the joke in Kevin Smith's Clerks 2 is not completely off when he says, like, I can summarize to you all 3 Lord of the Rings movies, and he just, like, walks in a straight line and mimes throwing a ring into a pit, and that's it. That is how the book is written.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to generate a lot of suspense out of that source material, unfortunately. I think the books work, by the way. Like, I think the books work because they tell you about a world rather than a story. And the world is captivating, and that's why the books are so well remembered and so beloved. But when you're trying to condense it into a short form story, which is what a movie is, you're sort of like up shit creek without a paddle, because then you realize there's no story in there. Because
you have to focus on the action, and when the only action is walking, it's a little boring.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. So I tend to disconnect with it. But you're absolutely right about the animation. I think that's how I managed to sludge through it. Is for those of you who don't know, Ralph Bakshis tried a new form of animation with the Lord of the Rings movie, his cartoon version, that is, which is rotoscoping.
Yeah.
And what it is you film stuff and then you draw over the film itself.
It had been done before. What he did quite differently is that he said that people played straight. It used to be that when you were being rotoscoped, they say, act cartoony.
Oh, okay.
So that when you draw over you, it still kind of looks like a cartoon. He was like, no, in the fight scenes, just played straight. And that's why the style is so different, because it looks like humans, interacting that have been drawn over. And I remember the first time I saw it when I was very young, maybe 7 or 8. I was like, wow, these are the coolest drawings I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And then, he cheated. That's not cool. He just sketched over it. That's cheating.
It's actually an enormous amount of work.
Yes,
so.
It's actually more work than if you had done the drawings. So You're right.
And the Hobbits, their movements as a result are so amazing. Like, there is scenes of them just walking in the woods. Not a lot, but there are.
Yeah.
But they're actually, in a way, some of the more fascinating scenes, just because he really draws the hobbits having to climb their way around things, whereas the human companions are just walking straight, where the hobbits, who are shorter, sort of have to bounce around a little bit and go up little trunks and whatnot just to get to the same point. And the movement of that and the detail of that is utterly fascinating.
Which is something you actually don't see in the movie, the Peter Jackson version, because they're actual real life-sized human beings that are doing that. So that he uses camera tricks, but you never see them kind of walk together and having to stumble a little more than the humans do in the movie. So that is something that I really enjoyed about the cartoon. You could really see the difference between them.
And I also like that they resisted the temptation to make the elves with really big ass long ears. Like they're modest sized ears. They're still pointy, but not crazy long. Because there's a sequel by another animation company that came out, and I remember when I was a kid watching, it was like, why do they have rabbit ears now? It's so off-putting. It's weird.
Yeah. And Legolas is not a magician that can do everything with his bow, too. It's like a nice change to the story. It's like, Legolas, take care of this. And in the Peter Jackson movie, it's like, okay, no problem. In this one, he's still kind of cool, but he has his limitations.
But he's cool. He's not uber super awesome. Oh my god, look at him. He's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, and it works better because it's sort of like the thing with cool is that it shouldn't impose itself on you, rather.
Yeah.
So I find it works better. Whereas Legolas by the third Peter Jackson movie was just such a dork to me because he was coming off like the kid who tries too hard,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's great when a character is cool because you watch the movie and, hey, after a while, say, I like that character, he's pretty cool. Whereas, it's not, like you said, being forced that the characters is all acting like super and, kind of pushing down the other characters, It's like, no, look at me. And so that's kind of annoying. It's like, okay, I get it. You're supposed to be the cool character. Just move on to the story, please.
Having said that, I have to say, though, Aragorn, I was a little bit disappointed with his design. I find it's a little bit overly simple. He's wearing that brown tunic with a belt and a cape and nothing else.
Yeah.
And his face is very simple as well. And I was a little bit disappointed. I kind of like Viggo Mortensen's look for Aragorn a lot more. Yeah, there's a little bit more of an idea of a former knight in there.
Okay.
Whereas the Ralph Bakshi version, he might as well be a barbarian. It doesn't really make a difference because his clothing is so spare.
That's true. Yeah. I did enjoy that when they finally reach Rivendell, Elrond is as ugly in the cartoon as he is in the movie. I was shocked. I was sure, okay, I'm sure it's a cartoon, so they'll draw him like he's supposed to be like the most beautiful elf there is. Like, oh, what the hell is that? The first time you see him, you're like, oh. So I'm guessing maybe Jackson got his inspiration from ugly Elrond from the cartoon. I don't know.
I think he did get influenced by the cartoon a lot because I find Golem looks exactly the same as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, part of it is that the source material describes Golem in excruciating detail, so it's hard to get wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, the resemblance I found was actually quite uncanny. They really look exactly the same.
And he also finished the fight at Helm's Deep the same way that in the cartoon, which is completely different from the book, where he gets m.A.A.d to come back with his knights and help. And that's not what happens at all in the book. So I'm sure there was some influence there as well. Peter Jackson had claimed he hadn't seen the cartoon.
Oh, really?
He claimed it at first, and then he kind of rescinded on it. It's like, yeah, I saw it. It's pretty good. And so it's like, I think people were calling like foul a little bit on him not having seen it. And actually, I was like, yeah, okay, I saw it. And yeah, it's pretty good. And I think he took some ideas there.
Oh, yeah, especially if he denies it at first, it's because he took some ideas from there. But, like, why not? Okay, sure, why not? I mean, like, you have the license now to do this. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. Unless there's some legal issues involved. Maybe Ralph Bakshi actually owns some of the rights on some of the changes he made.
I don't know. Yeah,
that could be why he denied it at first.
That's possible.
But in that case, then Peter Jackson would be a thief. So I'm not so for that.
Pretty much.
You know? Because I'm thinking of the situation with Wizard of Oz when they did Oz the Great and Powerful.
Okay.
They based it off the book, so they didn't have to get the rights from the people who did the Wizard of Oz movie back in the 1930s.
30s? Really?
Yeah. 30s.
That far back?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, carry on with your story.
Yeah, no, and one of the things that happened is that, they didn't have to ask for the rights, so they were cool with it, because they're basing it off the book, and the book is public domain. I can do whatever I want. But the thing is, they couldn't do any of the things that the 1930s movies did that the book didn't. So the ruby slippers, they couldn't do that. The yellow brick road, they couldn't do that. All of that stuff that's not actually in the book, they couldn't even come close to doing.
That seems odd because I would never think of Wizard of Oz without the yellow brick road. It's so ingrained that follow the yellow brick road. It's like it's an expression these days. So you have to make a movie without that. That's crazy.
Well, they did a gold brick road without ever calling it that, but
wow. So yeah, I wonder if that's what happened. But I mean, I think the movie it follows the book as well as as it can. It cuts out similar things like Tom Bombadil, who moves the story forward about 0 centimeters. Completely removed.
I actually appreciated it, especially given that it's an animated movie. You'd think like the musical character would be the guy that they wouldn't cut because it's a cartoon. But Ralph Bakshi was like, no, I'm making an adventure movie. None of that crap.
Yeah.
Like, what am I, Disney? Like,
pretty much. I'm not Disney. Although Pippin does sing at the end in Bree, which is so you have some sort of, still musical stuff happening there. One thing I don't like that I think the movie does the Peter Jackson movie does pretty poorly too is that Boromir is supposed to be a really cool guy, and then he turns when he gets tempted by the ring. And I think in this movie it's so short that you barely get to know Boromir at all. And he's like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And then you see him with Frodo. Okay, he's a bad guy. Whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, it happens in the space of 20 minutes in that movie, I think.
I know. From the first time you meet him, and all of a sudden until there you see him fight the orcs, I guess. So he's a good guy because he's with the group, and then he wants to take. Oh man, that's crazy! It's like so fast. All of a sudden he has this horn that he's never mentioned before that he's blowing. I'm like, where did that come from?
Okay, so about Ralph Bakshi, it seems that we both slightly prefer the Peter Jackson movie of the version of the Lord of the Rings.
Although the Ralph Bakshi is something you should see at least once just to see the style of it, because it is something different that I have never seen since. that style of animation, and is something unique. And if you're looking for unique stuff, you need to check it out.
See, that's an excellent point. I think I'm going to echo those sentiments like exactly word for word. Do I think it's a complete cinematic experience? No, especially not now that we have the Peter Jackson versions. I think if you're looking for that, there's no way you're not going to prefer the Peter Jackson version. But if you're at all curious about other interpretations of that mythology, or even just in animation, if you're interested in cinema, in animation, you're right. I think it is a unique piece of work. And I think it's gorgeous to watch. If you're somebody who doesn't need to get into a plot, and like you're not looking for a popcorn experience, but more of a cinematic experience, I think you're going to be fascinated just by the movement of these characters.
Yeah.
I often praise the movies of Hayao Miyazaki, who did Spirited Away and House Haunted Castle, for his use of silence.
Moving Castle.
Moving Castle, sorry. What did I say?
Haunted.
Oh, House Haunted Castle. But I also often celebrate him for his use of silence. Characters don't always feel like they have to move and act and be singing and Disney and just Disneying it up all the time.
Sometimes you just want to relax.
Yeah, and also it makes them feel more human, you know? And I think Ralph Bakshi really captures that in The Lord of the Rings. I think these characters, like I said, the best part for me was just watching the hobbits, just walking around trying to catch up to their human characters as they're walking alongside them, and just having those extra challenges that you don't think a shorter person would have, or a shorter creature would have, I should say.
Yeah.
And that part for me was the most fascinating. Those parts for me were the most cinematic. So yeah, no, I agree with you completely. You should at least check it out once.
Yeah.
Well, asking whether or not the Desolation of Smog is going to F with the original in reference to the Bakshi movie makes no sense to me.
No.
Look, we already know what Peter Jackson did with the exact same material. It's remarkably similar, and yet definitely his own thing.
Yeah.
But the question I'd like to ask in that case is like, what do you think they're going to do with the Desolation of Smog in terms of the actual source material, in terms of the Hobbit book?
They have to extend it, really, like they did in the first one. Because during The Hobbit, a bunch of times Gandalf kind of goes away, and then he comes back. And I went to do that, over there. And that's usually explained a little more in the Silmarillion and stuff like that. And they're going to have to pretty much jam that in the movie and have like Gandalf have his own adventures on the side, at certain points. And then the Hobbit and the dwarves on their side, could keep on going their way. Or they might intertwine the stories a little bit and have them both together all the time. But that would seem weird to me. Because I think at that point, Gandalf and the council is kind of opposing Sauron directly. Because he's trying to have a base somewhere in Middle Earth, and they're kind of trying to push him back away in Mordor. So it would seem weird to have the dwarves fight Sauron like that. It's just something very weird. Spoiler alert. But if they don't, it's going to seem like two movies. Like the dwarves do their things, Gandalf does his thing. It should have been like 2.5 hour movie maybe instead of just 1 3-hour movie. It's just very, very weird. I don't know. Some movies you should not extend.
But they did confirm that they're shoving a lot of material from the Silmarillion in it.
Of course.
Which makes sense. I mean, because where else are you going to put that stuff? Like, that stuff from the Silmarillion is often the stuff that the fans really love. But, you can't fit into a movie in itself because it's not a story. It's just exposition.
And let's just get that clear, though, first. The fans really love, but it's the fans that love it. If you just read The Lord of the Rings and you liked it, and you say, you want to read their stuff, and you start reading a Silmarillion, and you're not really into that universe, you're going to read like 5 pages of Silmarillion, and it's like, okay, I've had enough of this, and you're going to throw the book away, is what it is, because it's just a bunch of unlinked
they're notes.
Facts. They're basically notes, exactly. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. So people who love The Lord of the Rings like the Silmarillion. People who kind of like The Lord of the Rings are not going to read the Silmarillion, so... And, it also prevents, Peter Jackson from, 3 years down the line doing the Silmarillion as the movie, because that would be terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I mean. I think it's a good idea to shove that material in there. People love it, at least the fans do, and there's nowhere else to put it. Why not?
Yeah.
But they also talked about including some original material in there as well to flesh out the story. And I'm of two minds about that. Like, on the one hand, I'm always pro creators just doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure, go ahead. On the other hand, it's sort of like, well, now you're just admitting that you're stretching the shit out of this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, that can kind of backfire with Tolkien fans as well, that's, especially if they think that the new stuff is completely not in agreement with stuff that happens in the book, or, how characters would act or stuff like that, because I'm sure there are essays on how each and every dwarf in that company would act in certain ways. And, it's like, hey, this guy would not act this way at all. And, you're going to get angry fanboy reaction if you do it wrong.
But I think it's a good occasion for us to actually talk about the source material. So few people talk about the Lord of the Rings books, even though, there's such a phenomenon. But everybody goes like, yeah, well, the Peter Jackson movie did that. That's in the book. That's not in the book. Like, let's talk about the books themselves without talking about what's made it into the movie and what didn't make it into the movie.
That's going to be hard.
In the context of Don't F with the original, because the original are the books.
Okay.
Know? And
technically, I guess we should have made the whole episode about the books, because they are the original.
We really should have, but yeah.
Books are boring. All right, so
it's not in the purview of our show, but at the same time, we got time. Why not? And I think a lot of people would appreciate it, because I think a lot of people have read those books. They're really popular books, and I have to say, I'm very lukewarm about them.
Okay.
First of all, I am an avid reader who reads a book cover to cover. I do not skip the songs, even though they're boring. I do not skip passages. Okay. I read the book. It's for me, that's really important. And I think that's what kills my enthusiasm for the books, is that there's a lot of passages in there that really should have been cut out. It's really long and arduous to get through.
I think the rumor is that he took years to write the first couple of books, and the last book he wrote in a couple of months. It really feels like the first ones are really, really worked on and really fine chiseled, whereas the ending, it's like, I need shit to happen, and he just goes over, and the ending is very. If you read the Return of the King, a lot of stuff happens in this book as compared to the Fellowship of the Ring, where the first half of the book is just hobbits going from one city to the other, and it takes forever. So I can see that. I can see that when I reread them, I usually skip the first book and I just go to the Two Towers, because the first book, it really is nothing happens.
Yeah, it's more in the spirit of The Hobbit, to be honest. It really is like, hey, we're journeying la 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 for 300 and 400 pages,
Pretty much. And after that, when the adults come and, start leading the story, stuff happens, there's fighting there's conflict. That to me is a lot more interesting than just, like you said, just walking and the songs. Oh my God, the songs. That's why the Tom Bombadil chapters go really fast with me. He's like, okay, song. All right, 3 paragraphs, song. Okay, another 2 paragraphs, another song. It's just so fast to read those, and towards the end, I just skip them completely.
You said something interesting to me. Is when the grown-ups show up.
Yeah,
and that is how it feels, because I think one of the things that I think really captured people's imagination is that the hobbits are really well conceived creatures as the point of view for a child.
Yeah,
as a child, you read The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits are very easy to identify with. They're all desperately trying to participate in the action, and all the other human and elf characters are going like, no.
Yeah.
Stay safe, stay in your little burrow, and they just were like, but I want to help, I want to be part of something, and it's like, what kid cannot relate to that? Yeah,
and also the hobbits themselves, they just like to have fun, they like eating, they like napping. I'm not sure kids like that, but they basically live a jovial existence, so they're very relatable to kids, because they pretty much are kids.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's well conceived that way, but it does feel weird how the adults slowly overtake the story, essentially. I mean, granted, Frodo remains in control of the ring all this time.
Yeah.
But, well, in control, I say in quotation marks, but...
Even though Sam, at the end, it's like pretty much all Sam doing everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, he's your cool friend that, helps you along and does everything for you.
But the adults sort of have all their own personal dramas all around it that sort of make the meat of the story, if you will.
Yeah.
The Frodo's adventure being the skeleton, upon which it all hangs, and it feels weird to me. I'm always a little bit like, was that intentional that the novels just sort of grow up all of a sudden, or was it just that Tolkien got bored, was like, well, I'm tired of writing from a child's perspective and I want to write something else? Like, I wasn't entirely sure.
I don't know. Because even at a certain point, the two of the hobbits, they drink like certain special drinks and they actually grow up. They get taller in the book. So I don't know if that's, a symbol for that, even the kids eventually are going to grow up and you need to, start being more adult about everything. And that's what those two hobbits actually do. Even when they come back to the Shire, they're like, they take responsibilities of being mayor and leaders and stuff like that. And they've grown up, which is pretty much what happens in the story. The story grows up from being like a little child skipping to, serious stuff's happening now.
Yeah, and Frodo comes out so changed that he can never go back to the Shire.
Yeah.
He ends up in Valhalla, essentially. Spoiler alert, people.
Oh, yeah. If you miss one of the 17 endings of the last movie, that's what happens.
And I think it is a symbol of, like, you can never go back. Like, it's sort of like the tree of knowledge. Like, once you take a bite from that fruit, you can't go back to Eden.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a little bit of the same thing. Once you've had that experience with that ring, you can't go back to it,
Interesting. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, there's a part of me goes like, did Tolkien just get bored, or maybe was that intentional? Was he telling a story about entering adolescence? And I don't know if it really works if you take it from that angle. Because I've never had the courage to reread the books.
Okay.
I'd be interested to see what people think about that. People who have read it multiple times, if you feel that no, it totally is a coming of age story, or if you're like, no, dude, it's about Balrogs and knights and stuff. Like, stop trying to read into this shit.
Yeah, because no authors can have a second purpose to writing something. It just has to be a cool story, Dimitri. Just leave it to the cool story. Yeah. But in that sense, do you think that the Peter Jackson's movies do this coming of age thing, or is it just like 9 hours of crazy action?
Oh no, I think he does 9 hours of crazy action. I don't think he really captures any sort of theme. My big criticism, it remains the same with the Peter Jackson movies, is that it starts at point A and ends at point B, and I can't see the difference between point A and point B. It's the same world. That's
true. Well, at the end, in one of the endings, you see the hobbits are coming back to the Shire and they're on their horses and they're like, look at us, we're grown up. But, that scene lasts for like 2 seconds and then that's it.
I mean, he did capture a little bit the sadness of Frodo not being able to go back to the Shire. And in the movies, he really put the emphasis on the idea that he might be as well be dead.
Yeah.
Which is in the book.
Yeah.
So he really hammers down that point pretty heavily, but I don't know that. Is that the point that's the most important, or is the point that he can't go back home more important than the fact that he's dead and will go with the heroes?
Yeah. All right. Well, that filled up the podcast pretty nicely.
Yeah, that filled out the podcast pretty nicely. Anyway, I'm kind of curious. Like, I'm sort of conjecturing about what the books were about out of a reading that I did as a teenager. I never revisited the books, so
yeah,
it's entirely possible that I'm full of hot air because my memory is hazy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't helping at all.
Well, I'm sorry.
But if you guys want to make this discussion a little bit more informative because you have a closer attachment to the source material, please write us at mail@idiomatic.com or post a comment at idiomatic.com. We're super curious what you think.
Yeah.
We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. We're also on iTunes. If you could...
like us on Facebook.
Like us on Facebook. Absolutely. And also write us an iTunes review. It would be super helpful to help us continue to generate content on a regular basis for you. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to put cellophane over Nick and draw over him for stellar animation.
Oh, that would be a masterpiece. And green and everything. It's so stylish in that way.
So when the orcs come out, like everything around them is grayish, brownish. You don't really see anything, and then that's actually in the book.
Yeah.
They sort of suck out the light of everywhere, wherever they go, which is pretty well done. And at the same time, it's not nearly as somber as the Peter Jackson movies. There's still a little bit of color, so you get a stronger idea of what it is they're fighting for.
Yeah, when they need the color, like when they have the elves, or when they're in Rivendell, or in the Lothlorien with Galadriel, you have those whites, those white colors. But when they're not, it's like, oh man, it's so bleak around them. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and I like that dichotomy because it gives you an idea of what it is they're fighting for, what it is they're protecting, why.
You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
Hey everybody, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smog is coming out in theaters this week, and you know what that means?
We're going to be sitting in the theaters for 5 hours.
I didn't expect that one. It's pretty funny. Yes, and it also means another episode of Don't F with the Original.
With Nicholas, I'm the video game correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I'm Dimitri, editor-in-chief of idiomatic.com and movie critic. And as is the habit, not the Hobbit, but Tish.
Oh, that's bad. Do not get the extended edition, because, you don't want to die sitting on your couch. But still, a good movie to watch. What the cartoon does, it takes the first book and half of the second book. So it's basically the Community of the Ring and half of the Two Towers. And makes a 2.5-hour cartoon about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Pretty faithful to the J.R.R. Tolkien book. And in a way, I find that the atmosphere that they created in that animated movie is a lot more faithful to the spirit of the books.
Yeah, it's so somber. It's like, for a cartoon especially, you would think it's like all those bright colors and everything. No, there's like no yellow, no blue, it's all like gray.
That fight matters, which I didn't get with the Peter Jackson movie because I found everything was so muddy and grayish that it was like, oh no, they're destroying the world. It looks exactly the same as before, you know what I mean? And whereas this is much more balanced, so I like that a lot.
Yeah. I really like about this movie, which is something you rarely find me see about a 2.5-hour movie, but it really gets to the point so much faster than the Peter Jackson version. They really cut the useless stuff. I mean, they get to Rivendell in like 10 minutes or so. It's crazy. It's like no hobbits walking, no nothing. It's just, all right, we're in Rivendell now. Where to next? And the director really does a good job of cutting what is not important to the narrative. The purists are going to be so offended by it, but I think
when a new movie comes out, we discuss the original. Now, we're at part 2 for The Hobbit. I didn't really want to review The Hobbit part 1, mostly because I didn't watch it and don't want to.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then we thought, okay, well, let's do the Lord of the Rings thing. And then we realized, well, there's an older version of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
We're talking about the Ralph Bakshis Lord of the Rings movie from
1978. So
that's old.
Indeed.
It's an animated movie. It's pretty cool, and I'll let you talk about what the plot is.
The plot is the Lord of the Rings. If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, you need to crawl from whatever rock you've been living in the last 10 years and just rent it. The Peter Jackson version's pretty good. If you watch it once,